what we do here is go back.
Hello garden people! Welcome back to another episode of Fresh from the Garden, finally! I know it's been almost half a year and maybe a couple of you out on the internet are wondering what happened to the garden, but I assure you it's still doing great. So I've got some stories from the winter, kind of what I've been doing for site prep, but let's just start with the tour of where the garden is right now. So if you can see, the center of the garden is more of my annual vegetables. This garden in general is a mix between a food forest model with perennial fruit trees and berries and whatnot, and also annual vegetables. And so this year I've really been trying to find the balance. So one of the best annual vegetable plots that I think this year so far is this one. Throughout the winter I was trying to build up the soil with some off-site loam and a little bit of topsoil, in addition to green mulches and some regular compost as well. And so it's kind of hard to see with this plot because the wood chip level is so high, but it's actually raised quite a bit. And even inside of the garden, what I'm trying to maximize is sunlight exposure. So I don't worry too much about what plant is the best with another plant beyond what's tall, what's short, what's fat and bushy, what's long and spindly. So you can see from the tallest elements, there's some sunflowers, and there's a whole mix of sunflowers here. Myself with my older brother Grant put in mammoth sunflowers, akara, Mexican sunflowers, just a whole host of different mixed sunflowers. So just based on the size, I think these are mammoth sunflowers. And then right below it, you can see watermelon coming in. That's these leaves right here. And you can also see another sunflower with a tomato growing great, a potato, tomato, mixture of beets, which are these red stemmed plants, with spinach and more spinach, and more sunflowers and Malabar spinach, with more potatoes and tomatoes and sunflowers and sweet potatoes and Brussels sprouts and strawberries and clover and probably zucchini. But you can see in any given spot there's a whole bunch of different plants that all occupy different height niches. And that's true of most of the other plants. So this is a similar style bed, but this one features a tomatillo, which you can tell by the yellow flowers. Really vigorous. If you haven't had tomatillo, well, you probably have, so it's in salsa verde, but you might not know what makes salsa verde. The answer is tomatillos. Very good, very easy to grow, and it just, I planted this the same time as my tomatoes, and it's probably even taller than they are. And that's true from my experience in the past. This is another time, my third year trying to grow eggplants in the garden, and it's going better than last year, but you can see these flea beetles. Here's actually one right here. And I kind of been trying to squish them off. I don't really kill many things in the garden, but I do try to kill flea beetles. But it's just totally eviscerated. That being said, because I bought larger sprouts from Holub, it actually is still doing fine. Even though the leaves get kind of completely, I won't pinch it off, but completely laced, it's still growing pretty well. So this winter, I did try to grow some of my own sprouts. Sorry, it's very hot, so I'm sweating quite a bit. But they didn't grow super well, and I can show an image of my setup. I think the biggest problem was lack of light. And so this spring I did end up buying a few sprouts, as well as sprouting things from seed, and also for the potatoes, just getting some seed potato. And I think it's working out pretty well. A couple other new additions to the garden from last time. We have this apricot tree. I believe it's a Hunza apricot. And it's a major oil producing crop in some parts of the world. And hopefully soon, eventually, or well, not this year, maybe another 2 or 3 years, it actually makes fruit. But I'm really excited for this. I really like apricots. And I think this will be a really good tree. And I'm really especially excited for the oil producing properties of the nuts. And then intermixed, you see sunflowers and a blueberry. But another new addition to the garden that I've never had before, never successfully had before, is this cherry tree. Now this is a 4-in-1 cherry tree. You can see each of these tags that I haven't added metal tags yet are different varieties of cherries. These are all sweet cherries, clearly like the Lapin cherry, and that's the one cherry you can probably see right here. There's actually a couple more on a different branch, but this is the furthest along. It actually flowered quite a bit this spring, which I was excited for, and they're very pretty flowers, and the pollinators are doing really well. So one thing this garden I think does really well is it has flowers basically from the beginning of spring throughout the rest of the season. Right now, for example, you can see a lot of the radish flowers that I've used mostly as a cover crop, but they're coming in fine. The tomatillos, this yellow clover, I'm not actually sure what species this is, but I was informed this is a type of clover. In addition to the crimson clover and the pink clover, Dutch white clover that I actually seeded. I think there's a pink clover actually blooming right now, but the crimson clover was gorgeous. I'd never seen it before, but so here's a pink clover. And sometimes I just broadcast the seed, and some things fall where I want it to, some things don't, but then I transplant it. And you can see here near the base of this cherry tree, there's quite a few different species. And a lot of those actually brought in to occupy around the tree, including this clover. And you can see a black-eyed Susan, a pea, a bean. Probably don't need me that close, but so that's really exciting. Also, a couple of my more established permacultures are already doing really well. So this is my peach tree, and it came back really well. It had a couple tips that burned back, so I don't know if you can see this dead tip, but it's really not a problem because anywhere there was a dead tip, the new growth came back super vigorous. And so I'm kind of letting it bush out and just get as healthy as possible because I planted it last year. This fall I'll probably come back and select which branches I want and make more of a shape to it. But it's going in super well. And you can see a little bit more from this side. This is another example of kind of a complex polyculture where we've got bergamot and a service berry, which actually around town, I'll make a video soon hopefully, are coming into bloom, and they're all over town and no one eats them. They're really quite tasty. So the service berry here, and a tomato and bumblebee, and strawberries, some leeks, a castor plant, rhubarb, mulberry. This is kind of interesting. So I have a mulberry plant and a maple tree that I just planted in here. But I also have this grape. And so I'm basically going to try to train these plants to be trellises for my grape. In addition to this prairie plant and another black-eyed Susan. Speaking of trellises, one of the things that I'd like to do is get away from the metal trellises. Now, I actually don't really buy any metal trellises. I bought the fencing, or some of the fencing, but for the most part, being at the community garden, people throw away things year to year. And so I was kind of fish it out and stomp down the tomato cages or roll up the fencing that's too bent beyond regular use, but has its use in useful in trellises. So there's this one here and another trellis over here that is literally smashed down to some free tomato cages. And I don't think tomato cages actually work very well like the standard ones you buy. There's some videos online of better ones to make, but this style I think almost works better if you get a couple of them and maybe cut them in a certain spot and kind of make a wall out of it. And what I'm trying to train up here specifically is a cucumber. You can almost not see it beyond the potato, but the cucumber is starting to vine up. And then on the back there's some sunflowers. So this is part metal trellis, and by the end of the season it'll be even taller with a biological trellis. But getting back to what I was initially saying with growing your own trellises year to year in place, I took some cuttings from a willow tree, kind of a locally grown wild willow, not a weeping willow, I don't think those work. But this here is just a cutting that I put in really late spring, or sorry, really late winter or really early spring. And it's growing fine. I actually dug one up and it was rooting, so I can tell they're rooted. So this will be fun because I'll take off the extra branches and just grow it as a trellis in spot. You can also see I put in some infrastructure around the garden. Like these two posts are probably the most obvious example. For hoses, everyone asks like, why are there so many stumps? Now, some of them are just decorative. Some of them kind of give frame to the beds. Some are seats, but these two are specifically to use as a brace for my hose. Because you can imagine coming here to water when your friends aren't here is kind of hard because the hose can drag across your plants and kind of knock them over. So having a brace where you can wrap it around the hose and then get the hose to about right here, and then I can hit anything else in the garden, like from this spot, hit any of those. So we have like annual vegetables sort of in the center, and then as we go over here we have more of the berry bushes and fruit trees. That being said, there's kind of fruit trees around the perimeter. But one of the most exciting things so far this season is the grapes, and specifically this one grape right here. This grape plant is going crazy. Now last year it had I think 2 or 3 bunches of grapes, but this year there's probably, I don't know, up to 40. I haven't counted, but you can see grapes here, growing both on this side of the fence and on the outside of the fence, which is great, because I hope people walking by can pick their own grapes and get excited about them. In addition to the grapes, the strawberries have been going in crazy. So you can probably see a couple of them in here if we just pull up. So here's a strawberry and here's a strawberry. This is really the first year that I've actually had enough that some strawberries have made it from the garden. I've had strawberries in years past, but I always eat them all. And yesterday I actually made my first strawberry meads of the season, which is kind of exciting. A strawberry rhubarb mead, which is really simple. I'll show a little picture of that, but really excited about that. So in addition to the strawberries, another of the really cool berries are the currants, and they're just starting to ripen. If we look along this stem, we can see several currants. Some of them are actually red already, but the other ones are still not ripe. One thing I have noticed last year, in addition to this year, is that currants seem to ripen, got some cottonwood, intermittent, or not at the same time. They have a staggered ripening. I don't know if that's because these are young plants or if that's just the nature of the berries in general, but the fun thing is we have several different kinds. I think there's 4 kinds over here, and I got a couple more this year, a couple red currants and a white currant, which are really exciting. One of the best currants is actually over here that I got at the Iowa Arboretum plant sale. So if anyone's in Iowa near Boone, the Iowa Arboretum is really a special place. You should check it out. They had a plant sale last year. So I got this on kind of close-up because it was very pot-bound and half dead. But I took out most of the center foliage, and you can see a bunch of really healthy growth coming back. But even the foliage I left actually is making red berries. So I'll probably pick these soon. This is I think a crandall red currant. Don't quote me on that, but it's a type of red currant. Oh, and this is really exciting too. So several of the fruit trees flowered this year, including this plum tree. And this one actually decided to abort its flowers and its fruit. I think it wasn't ready, so that's fine. I'd rather the tree just be ready when it makes fruit. But this one actually did flower. And its plums are coming in. There's only about 5 of them, but I'm so excited. And it's a beautiful plum. There's a couple more. And this one I kind of messed up a little bit in the shaping of it last winter. I tried training the branches too much. And if you can see, there's no older branches on this side of the tree. There was 2 of them, but I broke both of them off on accident. So that's kind of a lesson when you're trying to shape your tree. Be a little bit cautious. Don't get too crazy or else you will snap off the branches. Also a lesson, if that happens, don't beat yourself up over it because the tree will recover usually. And it's doing just fine. So that's kind of exciting. There's a couple gooseberries and whatnot. But one thing I've really been trying to focus on is how do I actually eat food from the garden? Because I think as a person, I get really excited about the horticulture aspect of it, and that's still an exciting part to me. But one of the things I've done is make more lettuces, because last year I didn't plant any, just like plain lettuces, you know, like a deer tongue lettuce or the lettuces like this. And you can make a salad with all the herby plants, and they're great, but unless you have something that's really simple and has a nice crunch, then the salads just get really dense and just too flavorful. So I planted some lettuces in here. There's several different kinds. When I come, and this may look crazy, but what I did was I helped build the bed over the winter, and then I cover cropped it with peas and with radishes. And when I went back to plant the lettuces, I kind of just pulled up the radishes in rows. So it's kind of hard to see. You can see a row of tatsoi here. This is tatsoi, it's a type of brassica. And then a row of this kind of lettuce. I don't remember what kind of lettuce this is, but I guess we're gonna have a salad for dinner tonight. And then there's several peas, right? And the peas are starting to make pods, so that's exciting. And there's also all these radish flowers, which I like the pods of the radishes. So here's a couple that are a little bigger. But radishes make these pods, and they taste just like radishes, but not quite so potent, which is nice, because radishes are kind of intense in my opinion. So it's actually another part of the plant that, I think you can eat any part of radishes, but it's a tasty part, nice texture. So peas, and then a different kind of lettuce, which I already pulled up here, and then more lettuce and more peas, and then a couple, like here's a tomato, another tomato I put in, more peas, and then we get to the spinaches. Now, the spinaches I'm actually not going to pull up because in this part of the garden, they're actually bolting already. So I'll let these go to seed. I have spinaches in other parts of the garden that are still good to eat, so I eat those right now. Then I've got arugula, which is kind of a funny arugula. Actually, it's starting to get the more typical arugula shape, but when it was first growing, it was almost completely round, so no one was like, well, that doesn't look like arugula, but then you smell it, and it definitely smells like arugula, and tastes like arugula. So that's fun. There's beach greens in here. There's also carrots. There's also basil coming in here. So it may look kind of crazy, but having the radishes kind of being overstory is both good for the pollinators. You can see a couple of small bees in here right now. But it also is nice because it lets your things like basil and the spinach itself even grow for longer and not quite such intense sun, because they don't really need full sun. I mean, this spot of the garden is one of the sunniest spots. So having a little bit of an overstory is actually an advantage to growing greens like this and letting them stay longer. But I also think about succession. So as this bed gets older and the spinach goes to bolt, the beets mature, and the lettuces are basically done for the season, I've also gone ahead and planted squashes. So this squash in particular will start to take over the bed as the lettuces die out. In addition, there's sunflowers that I put at the different vertices, and I've also put some beans and tomatoes to kind of take over as a secondary crop after my spring crop is done. So that's kind of exciting, something that I've come back most days of the week and had really nice salads from. So I'm excited about this. Let me set this down. A couple other exciting things is the Aronia berries are making fruit. I've tried Aronia. Honestly, I don't think it's that tasty, but I think it will be a really nice addition to mead because it actually adds a bittering component and a nice color too. So you may not think about it, but if a drink is too sweet, then it's actually not very good. So you need some sort of complex bittering texture to really bring out the full body of a mead. So I'm excited for those. The nasturtiums I planted all around the garden. So you see this beautiful bluish foliage, and eventually I think it's going to start to take off and climb up the fence. Sort of competing, but also just, I don't know, collaborating or growing with the grape that will take over. So I'm really excited for that because it should be a tasty flower, which not only is stimulating in look for your salads, but also it has a nice peppery taste. In addition, speaking of flowers, this eastern prickly pear is making flowers again. And last year the flowers were absolutely stunning. So I'm really excited to see this again. The plains prickly pear has not made flowers this year, but it is growing really well, so you can't really complain with that, which is exciting. The sedums are also really growing well. It's one of my more alien looking plants, I think, because it kind of has this weird foliage, and then out of nowhere these flowers jut up. And there's two different species there. One thing that I saw, I'm just kind of going along the fence line, one thing I saw in a different video by Edible Acres was how to stool layer vining plants, and this grape was a perfect candidate. So you probably can't see it because there's sunchoke's coming out in front of it, but there was a lot of green foliage or green new stems coming up from the woody base. And so what I did was I covered it with a sort of humus material. It's a mixture of dirt and then my potting mixture that I make, which is mostly coconut coir, vermiculite, and perlite. Now I wouldn't have made that potting mixture just for the garden probably, but the sprouts that didn't work in my grow room, I used that media and then just brought it back out to the garden. So it's sort of a dual use function. And I'm hoping that by the end of this season, at the vertice between the woody stem and the green new stem, it should send out roots. And so if I decide to, I can come back and cut those off and then propagate the grape for free. So that's a really exciting use and sort of a more economical way to garden. Yeah, so let's just do a tour of this side of the garden. We haven't been over here too much. Yeah. So I don't know if you remember what this looked like before, but it definitely is a lot different. I've been trying to build a shade wall because when I've come here during like Saturdays during the day, it just gets brutally hot. And the garden's young enough that there's not much shade in it. Granted, you can go in the forest, but I want this to be more of a wall of shade. And so I brought some species over. Now, one thing that you probably shouldn't do is transplant trees in the height of summer on a hot day. So this black cherry is very unhealthy, but I think it'll survive. But then beneath that, I've got a red bud and a type of like wild pear, grape, an apple rootstock, and a cherry rootstock. So between all of these, in addition to the honey locust and the plum tree that's already there, I want it to be about a 10-foot wall of shade that I can actually sit under and have a conversation and a drink of water. So I've also transplanted my new female Seabury because I had a male Seabury and I bought like 3 very small female Seaburys last year. All the females died, so then I was left with one pollinating male, but no females that actually make the berries. So I got this one this year, and it's really exciting. I think this is a very healthy plant. It's growing like crazy, so I think this would be a nice spot for it. A couple chives, oregano, a couple of the things in here. Let's look at the prairie bed. Now, as I said, I'm almost more of a horticulturist than I am a gardener, and I really like the prairie plants. It's more of a flower prairie. There's not much grass in here. But you can see, I think this is, well, I'll put the name in this, in the video. I don't remember the name off the top of my head. But then you got a couple kinds of yarrow and a salvia species and a couple sunflowers, and there's a couple milkweeds. This one actually came up naturally. There were 2 other milkweeds, and I'm not seeing them. That's okay. cannabis plant. We got black-eyed Susan. There was a columbine earlier in spring. There's some gray-headed coneflower, which I brought from my place. It's exciting. And bergamot and all sorts of good stuff. So this is really fun, and it changes so much week to week, and there's different flowers, and it really adds both habitat for toads. There's a lot of toads in the garden, and bugs, and the pollinators, and the predator insects, and probably the pest insects too, but you know, the stuff I want as well. So really excited about this. So yeah, that's sort of the sense of the garden. I mean, we can keep walking around, and there's some new stuff. I mean, here's a bed full of rootstocks. It's not going to be here long term, but I needed a place to put them, so I just made a bed for that. And then threw some tatsoi and some strawberries and whatnot. And one thing you'll see when you come to the garden is I've been trying to put strawberries just everywhere because one of the major weeds we have here is Creeping Charlie, and I want this to be a competitor. Oh man, it's so flavorful. Makes your mouth water even while it's eating it. The honeyberries were really good. Had several of those. They were really tasty. It's an amazing plant too because it repels water in the rain. Almost better than any leaf I've ever seen. So there must be sort of micro hairs. Yeah, you can kind of tell. Well, it doesn't even look that different when you look at it, but when you see it with raindrops, they stay right on top of the plant, and if you shake it, they all fall off. It's kind of amazing. One of my asparagus patches is doing fine. Now I'm trialing putting a zucchini in with the asparagus, and I think it'll be fine, but it's sort of a waste because once the asparagus goes to its ferny stage, you don't eat it, so I want it to take over the bottom underneath the asparagus with the zucchini. The raspberries are also coming in like crazy. One thing I've never appreciated with raspberries before is the amount of bees that pollinate the flowers. So the flowers don't look like much, and at this stage they're actually more of the berry stage. But when the flowers first came out, this was just swarmed with bees of all different kinds. Both the big bumblebees, the little bumblebees, and then the huge array of native bees we have. I think a lot of people don't realize that in Iowa, I believe we have over 300 different species of bees. And I'll look up the exact number, but it's something ridiculous that no one thinks about. I mean, everyone thinks of honeybees and bumblebees, but there's actually a huge diversity of bees here. And that's why we have so many different, so this is a problem. So the one insect that I kill in addition to the flea beetles is the squash borer moth. Beautiful moth. Actually, they saw it for the first time last year and was sort of in awe of it. I was like, oh, that's a really cool moth. And I looked into it, and it's the beetle that burrows into all the squashes and lays its eggs that eviscerates the plant base. So I actually caught one yesterday. It was the first time I saw one. But they're a beautiful moth, but I do try to catch them when I can. But really, you can only catch them in the morning when they're slow and the weather's still cold. When it's hot like this, they're so fast. So I'll show a picture of those. They are quite pretty, but they're also super destructive. So, and yeah. So it's sort of a fun thing, and yeah, that's kind of the state of the garden at the moment. If you can see, I put a lot of this wood in, and I don't want to repeat myself, and it's sort of the challenge when I come to the garden, because I want to show all the different plants and all the different combinations. But you know, if anyone's in Ames, feel free to stop by the community gardens and just walk around and see it for yourself, because it's sort of one thing to hear it all just vomited at you and like say what everything is, but another thing just to see it and sort of hear the birds and the insects and sort of experience it. So that's the state of the garden as of June, what was it, 11th today, 2018, and hopefully I'll make another update before 6 months from now. So thank you, garden people, and I hope you have a good day.
The abstract and become the reality.